What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? One of my college classmates wrecked his Range Rover over winter break and came back in an Aston Martin. In middle school we were asked to draw our homes for some assignment and hand it in at the end of class. A popular, extremely wealthy kid that sat behind me raised his hand and smugly asked the teacher for another sheet of paper because he couldn't draw it all on one page. His friends just snickered, but I was cringing. Even at 12 I remember thinking it was such a snobby thing to say. Bragging about your parents' money is honestly just sad, especially when people are adults and still do it. Worked with this kid who was a good kid, but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He'd just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it, since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant and the sommelier said certainly, sir. Then the sommelier whispered, just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, is that a lot? The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid. And he got a lot better. But he just didn't know. Once he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills and she deposited $20,000 into his account. Went to school with a crazy rich kid. His parents divorced and each decided to buy his love. Mommy owned a real estate agency, so she got him a license and spoon-fed him enough sales for a six-figure income. The dad then bought him a magazine. Yes, the dad bought a magazine for his 24-year-old cokehead son to run. Worked about as well as you'd imagine. Holy shot bro, that's some terrible parenting there. I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. And for people asking, so the kid is 19 years old. He was 17 at the time of this incident. The father is in the picture, but my boss, the dentist, is the main breadwinner and disciplinarian of the family. The husband is more like another child and just works here and there and lives off her money. She tries to act tough and instill certain morals and values in her kids, but then turns around and caves to all of their demands. For example, her twin daughters are going to university next year and instead of staying in a dorm they demanded a 2-bedroom 2-bathroom apartment. They refused to share a bedroom or even a bathroom. At first she told them absolutely not, but they whined and complained and she caved. This will be a 2-bed 2-bath apartment in Toronto, by the way, where rent prices are through the roof. My boss is very much about appearances and from a young age got her kids accustomed to a privileged lifestyle. She created monsters. My fiance's cousin. He managed to crash 4 cars while still in high school because his father would replace them. When he moved on to college, he got kicked out of several apartments for owning a dog when they weren't permitted. He told me he didn't care though, since his father also funded his continuous stream of new housing. From what I last heard, his father is now paying for his long-standing coke habit. I knew a girl whose allowance was $90 a day. She got into trouble so they cut it to $90 a week. Knew this one guy at my college who didn't understand why everybody is so worked up about student loans. I remember him saying something along the lines of, why don't people just pay the tuition up front? He was also quite sheltered. My friend literally throws away his change because he hates holding coins. Doesn't matter if it's 99 cents, he'll throw it away. That shadds up. Went to HS with this insufferably spoiled kid. Family had a couch in their home's elevator and classical European sculpture. This was in the US. Kid talked down to about the less fortunate on a regular basis. Once made fun of me for picking a coin up off the ground. In high school a kid was bragging that he got in his 3rd fender bender in his old car, 3 years old, that his parents gave him but he hated. So his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year, car to incentivize him to drive better. This kid back in high school was whining, I mean literally whimpering, that he had to wait something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. If that was me, I'd be surprised it only took 6 weeks to custom build a car and ship it from another country. I don't really know anything about cars. That just seems like a short time period to custom build and ship such a large item. I've waited longer than $4.99 on eBay. I worked at a Starbucks and we hired a new guy, who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach and hand him a pair of gloves and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day, lol. So my best friend's wife teaches at a ritzy $40K per year private school, as in $40,000 a year for elementary and middle school. I think the HS is like $50K plus. Well, she teaches 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember. And she said she always goes around the class after the summer break and asks them what they did over the summer, and she particularly remembers one kid complaining about how much his summer sucked because he was stuck on his parents' yacht all summer and they didn't even take it to anywhere cool. Just Italy. I student taught at a pretty well-to-do school. Not private, but rich area. One of the guys who was student teaching at the same time was doing a lesson on income inequality. He mentions that the average Canadian salary was $XXK. The kids are all pleasant, saying it's a reasonable amount, etc. It took him a while to realize and correct it was $XXK a year, not a month like they were thinking. Couldn't imagine thinking that amount a month was average. I wouldn't say rich kid, but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the UGR trading card game. First time I hung out at his place I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was, some even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things he yells, "Where's the credit card?" And immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell, "Kyle, mom said no more buying stuff online," and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor and I'm just standing there over him in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either, if I remember correctly. Both of his parents were cops. Went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." Rich kid responds, "I promise you we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got me. Friend got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. Parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and build her a fully functioning playhouse with a bathroom, and bedroom. Just the tip of the iceberg with this family though. Update. Lots of comments. I will try to round out the image. And for what it's worth, no, neither I nor my family is rich. We just lived really close to the family and my dad and mother became close friends with them. They were on the whole really nice and innocent people, drunken on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, one commenter was correct. This is not really rich kid syndrome. And no, these are not normal rich people. These are ultra rich, probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family's house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. This was not a typical rich family. Their father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Esprits at his lake house. Also built a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on its surprise. He never really used it more than once or twice. An impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mom called and reminded them I need to be home for some sports event or something, and we hopped in their Bentley dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car soaking wet at that. At the Millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in world and from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza style sash tattoo. I could go on, but the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father, who inherited his family business from his father, sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason the town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most depressed in the state, and the schools unequivocally the worst. Apparently there was this 15-year-old girl who was going on an exotic vacation to some Pacific island or something, but her favorite show was on TV the day of their flight, and she really wanted to see it. Her parents delayed the flight so that she could watch an episode of her favorite show. This girl would always brag about how she's been to every continent except Antarctica and that she's visited so many countries. Then she wondered why people called her the rich kid and insisted she wasn't rich. One girl from my high school got breast implants for her 18th birthday. Her mom joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new $90,000 Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job I could pay for my food and house too, said at 18. In the middle of a discussion between two middle-class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while rich girl was talking non-stop about buying the best most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Reed had actual responsibilities for the first time, moved cross country for an 8-month education course where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc. and tax on things like we can just split the bill. I know you're saving but it's just, amount at least $50. You'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her, or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. One of my friend's friends ended up paying for a night out food and entertainment. He'd go up before we got the bill and just pay. No matter how much we argued with him and tried to pay him back, wouldn't take it. Nice dude, mad baller rich. When I was in college, and in various groups that interacted with people with established careers, the people with careers, would do this for us. Not all the time. Just every now and then go cover everyone's tab for whatever outing we were at. Honestly, it taught me a lot more about sharing what I had with people than it made me feel like I was a poor college student. But it had a lot to do with the attitude. Most of the time, when it happened, they'd tell everyone good night, not make a scene, and do it behind our backs and leave. We'd go to close out and the waiter or waitress would be like, "Oh no." Bob or Mary always took care of it. Being humble college students and usually sometimes knowing these servers lent us just tipping on the usual bill, and for a lot of these people it became an unspoken social agreement that they would cover us and we would pay it forward by making sure our regular servers got taken care of. Why don't you just get a pass to Disney and Universal? The people at my school TBH cannot fathom having multiple spiders in their house in a week. A dream broner, a boxer, though he was not born rich but became rich in his 20s. If you are not going by what Felix Dennis considers rich, he was supposed to be the next boxing superstar but was beaten badly and exposed. He put out a video of him in line at Walmart. He paid with a $100 bill and threw the change on the ground saying, "Here's our band, only deals in 100s. This is a man who had 7 children by 8 women at 23, 6 years ago, and who knows how many now. He had to settle a $1 million jewelry debt earlier this year. A friend of mine inherited a lot of money, enough to buy a house, and he spent it on 2 cars, a Subaru completely modded to Ken Block's version of it and some BMW, both extremely expensive. We asked him a few months later why he didn't buy a house with it because he still lived with his parents. So he told us that he already owned a penthouse. He just didn't want to move yet.